Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome on behalf of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan. I'm Michelle Horan. I'm a registered dietitian licensed in New Hampshire where I practice, and super happy to be with all of you today talking about the 10 foods you should be eating. Now, just a couple little sort of housekeeping things before we get started. I think that a lot of you have done this before, but just in case you haven't, please know we do have folks muted through the talk. So please feel free to put questions down in the chat box. I do tend to get a little bit distracted sometimes, and where we only have a half hour, I might try to save questions for the end, but certainly feel free to put them in as they come up. And we'll try to get through a lot of the really cool information that I have to share with you all today. So I appreciate you being here. I wanted to just dive right in and talk about the 10 foods you should be eating. As a dietitian, I get asked this a lot. What kind of things should I be eating? Shouldn't I be eating? So we're going to really kind of dive today into what I have kind of assembled as some of the top 10 things we should be eating. But you need to know right out of the gates, I'm actually going to give you a little bit of a disclaimer here, that there really is no complete comprehensive list of the specific top 10 foods, because really there's not one food that does it all, right? We eat food, not particular nutrients. And a lot of people have their very own taste preferences, things they like, things they don't like. So really, when we're talking about a healthy food, even the word healthy is sort of kind of loose, right? We're going to be talking about foods that offer a lot of bang for our buck nutritionally. So we'll talk about what are some of the benefits that a particular food might do for us in our body, what kind of nutrients it offers, but then also too, of course, how to use that food in a way that is kind of quick and easy, because most of us are super busy and don't have hours a day to prepare our meals. And then also to making it taste good. But really, I want you to think about, even as we go through these individual foods, that if there's one you don't like, no sweat. I never want anybody to be eating a food they don't like. And you may be surprised by how more frequently than I ever expected, I have people tell me they choke certain things down because it's healthy for them. So we never want to be eating something we don't like. When we really think about the word healthy, we're really thinking more about the overall context of the pattern with which we're eating different foods. So somebody can be very healthy and including things like that are typically in society considered not healthy, like pizza and Cheetos or whatever. But if most of what they're doing includes a lot of great nutritious foods, that person can still be healthy. So I just want to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that this is not at all a be all and end all list, but we're going to talk about certain foods that are particularly nutrient dense, meaning there's a lot of nutrition packed in to a particular food. A couple buzzwords that are going to come up over and over again before we start talking about some of these foods that I want to share with you here. You've probably heard them. You might even know really very well what they are, what they do, but just real quick, when we hear the word antioxidant, and if we were in a classroom and had lots of time, I would want to really hear from all of you how you interpret some of these words. But when we hear the word antioxidant, we're really talking about a compound in our foods that gives our cells a protective effect. So not to get too sciencey on you, but just in general, as we move through life as human beings, our cells are exposed to what we call oxidative damage. Our cells just, they go through it. So when we are talking about these compounds that can be bouncing around in the body called free radicals that just cause some damage to our cells and they take a beating, antioxidants that we're consuming in our foods can help to give our cells a protective effect, which is a good thing, right? We want them to stay as healthy as they can. When we hear the word anti-inflammatory, like super buzzy right now, right? There's lots of stuff we know about inflammation in the body leading to chronic disease or exacerbating symptoms that we might have from particular conditions we already have. So anti-inflammatory, we're going to be talking about foods that have compounds that help to fight inflammation in the body, which again, obviously also something we want to do. And then when we hear the word phytonutrient, it's really if you take those root words down, phyto meaning plant, nutrient meaning like nutrition, right? So it's really just naturally occurring nutrients in the plants or plant chemicals that give us some benefit. And in a lot of cases, these compounds are the immune system of the plant that we kind of get the benefit from. So when I think about, again, as I mentioned before, about like I feel like the word should is kind of a harsh word. It feels very like, these are the foods you should be eating. Like, I am not the food police. I'm not here to take away your cookies, and I'm not here to cram kale down your throat. But I do think there are some foods that we ought to think about including if we like them. So without further ado, those are just sort of my disclaimers as we move through this material. So number one, and by the way, not in any particular order. And I know it's not a very specific food, but again, depending on what you like, the berries. The berry family. So these foods are going to provide us a great nutritious source of carbohydrates. So I know right now in our diet culture, unfortunately, carbs are like public enemy number one, but please don't cut them out. They're very essential. They are the only macronutrient in our food that breaks down into sugar. All of our cells in the body use sugar for energy. So we need to include some nutritious carbohydrates. So berries are a great place to get that in. They're going to offer us some fiber. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with fiber and what the recommendations are, but I put all the numbers on these slides, and I'm going to just share with you now, in case you didn't know, the recommendations for our fiber over the course of a day would be to get in at least 25 grams for women, up to 36 grams for men. I know it feels very arbitrary, like 36, but these are the recommendations that are out there for optimal GI health, as well as other, conditions in the body. Really, we'll talk a little bit in the future about like heart health and stuff like that. But if we're having a serving of berries, like a cup of blueberries, for instance, we're going to get 3 grams of fiber, a cup of raspberries, 8 grams. So you can see right there, now that we kind of have the perspective of how much fiber should I have over a day, these can give you a good chunk, especially if you're choosing something like the raspberries. So some of the compounds that are in these great fruits are going to be the anthocyanin. It's just kind of a family of those phytonutrients that I was mentioning. So those plant chemicals that are out there in all of our plant foods, whether it's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, starchy vegetables, or, all of our nuts and seeds, teas, all of those, they're going to be chock full of some of these plant chemicals, and they've identified thousands and thousands of them in nature already. They tend to be grouped by families. So this flavonoid family, the anthocyanins is in that family, and some of the cool things that they do in the body is help to keep the blood vessels stretchy and elastic, resistant to blood pressure changes, among other things. We're also going to find in our berries, we're going to get some vitamin C, which is crucial for immune health. It also helps with the formation of collagen, so it can help with wound healing. So if trying to get over a surgery, for instance, also, we're going to get potassium from our berries as well. Potassium is going to be really key for building proteins in the body, also for proper communication between the brain, and especially for heart health as well. Magnesium is another compound another nutrient rather, that we're going to get from our berries. Super important for, I think of the magnesium sort of more like the neurochemical side of things, like the wiring in the body. So for nerves, for communication, again, between the brain and the nervous system, but also for bone health. And vitamin K, some people may be familiar with, if you've ever known anybody who's had to take a blood thinner for some reason. Vitamin K is a really essential nutrient for keeping our blood at a proper consistency and assisting with blood clotting, which we want, because if we don't want to bleed out from a paper cut, right? So just a real quick example of how kind of chock full these are, how much bang for our buck we get. If you had just 1 cup of strawberries, you're going to get over 100% of your daily value for vitamin C. That DV is daily value, and it just means basically like the recommended amounts, right? So some of the key factors we're going to get mostly from those phytonutrients, they're going to give us the benefit of being anti-inflammatory in the body. The vitamin C is a very powerful antioxidant. We're also going to get antioxidant properties from those phytonutrients. And as I mentioned before, since a lot of these nutrients play a role in the way that the signals run through the brain and to the heart and all of that, we're going to find, and the research shows us, that we're going to have a reduced risk of heart attack when we're including these foods in our regular eating. Also, some research shows it might boost our learning, that's supposed to be learning, not leaning, sorry, and memory. So when it comes to how to use it, if you like them, I say any old way to get them in. If you like them whole and fresh, and especially when we can get them in season, not too far off for us in New England here, we might have them just simply as a snack. We can toss them onto salads or make a little parfait out of them with yogurt, toss them onto cereals, oatmeals, what have you. When it comes to trying to save some money, because let's be honest, sometimes, especially with the way the groceries are these days, oh my gosh, frozen can be a really great cost-effective way to have them, and also a way to buy some but not have them go bad on you. I know we've all been there where you pick up some beautiful looking berries and then like 2 days on, you open up the fridge, you're like, really? There already is like 3 smushy ones in there and you're like, what the heck? So anyway, frozen can be awesome, right? Because they're not going bad on you. You don't have to trim them or anything like that. You take out what you need, but obviously they're going to be better suited, not for snacking whole, because they're going to get kind of mushy once they're defrosted, but blended up in smoothies, into a hot cereal. We can cook them down into a fruit topping or a sauce, or again, mixed into parfaits and things like that. And I do want to address the real quick question about the daily value. It's a great question. So for the most part, we really want to kind of hit around like kind of meeting our needs for the daily values that are out there. There are some instances in which it's not a big deal if we go very far over. So our water soluble vitamins like the B vitamins and vitamin C, those are not going to be a big deal if we get more or a lot over what's the recommended amount, because honestly, we just pee out the extra if we take in too much. There are some particular nutrients, though, different vitamins and minerals that are what we call fat soluble, meaning fat transports them around the body. They have a tendency to stick around a little more. And so there are many vitamins and minerals for which there's been an upper limit, tolerable upper intake limit set for those. And you can find that online if you ever were to just look up the UL or upper limit for particular vitamins and minerals. So it is one of those things, like we want to make sure, like if we're taking vitamin supplements, for instance, we really want to be mindful that we're not going to go above and beyond in the case of some of those that might lead to toxicities. We don't generally have to worry about it from food, though. That's a good question. Okay, so number 2 are leafy greens. And this is not a shocker here. I know I already mentioned, I know everybody feels like, oh, I'm trying to choke down kale. Some people love it, which is awesome if you do. But really, when we think about it, again, think about the families and how some of those plant chemicals tend to be grouped by family. So if we're talking about leafy greens and you just can't stand kale, spinach is a great option. Collards, mustard greens, Swiss chard, anything in this family. They're not going to give us like tons of fiber when you think about them, right? When you have them raw, you're going to have like a whole cup. It's going to be, there's a lot of water in there, right? So they take up a lot of space, not super fiber dense, but they do offer a little. And then the family of phytonutrients that are in a lot of our leafy greens are going to be the carotenoids. So some specific ones that are super high in our leafy greens, lutein, a lot of people might be familiar with, zeaxanthin, and these can play a really big role when it comes to, again, not only being anti-inflammatory. There's a lot of good research showing that these particular phytonutrients really play a good role in keeping our vision healthy as well. So going to be really strong antioxidant properties, and actually might prevent us from developing age-related macular degeneration, sometimes called AMD. So some of the other nutrients that we're going to get in there, of course, as we go through these, there are going to be a lot of repeats, right? So I'm not going to have to tell you about every single vitamin as we go along, but vitamin A, again, really a key component for our vision health. Vitamin C, we already talked about. Vitamin K, we talked about. Also folate, really great for brain development as well as brain functioning. And for women of childbearing age, there's a huge relationship there with preventing neural tube defects should you become pregnant. So neural tube defects in an infant or a fetus rather. Potassium, which is also super key for, again, we talked about before, building proteins in the body, some of like the wiring in the body and messaging that way. Also magnesium, calcium. Calcium, a lot of people are really familiar with for bone health. And then also iron as well. And so iron is also something that we might be low in if we're not eating a wide variety of foods, but it's really important, and not just for energy levels. Some people might know of folks who have an iron deficiency and have a lot of fatigue or low energy, but also iron is really important for proteins in our red blood cells that carry oxygen around the body. So super important. So we can get a lot of these particular vitamins and minerals from our leafy greens. And again, just a quick example of how dense these guys are, just a half a cup of cooked down collard greens, and we get 400% of our daily value of vitamin K. And just as a total side note, when we talked about the vitamin K before, and if you know anyone who has to take a blood thinner, they may have heard, or you might have heard, that people have to stay away from their leafy greens if they're on a blood thinner. But really and truly, it's just a matter of keeping them consistent. So if someone is not having leafy greens at all ever, and then they're on a blood thinner, and then they have even a half a cup of collard greens, like that's probably going to throw things off a little bit. So again, we talked already about some of the health benefits of these guys, and then how we might use them. If you like them, having them raw in the salads is sort of like really the easiest, quickest, low prep way to eat them, with a dressing or what have you. Or sometimes we can saute them and cook them down very, very simply, just a little bit of olive oil, maybe some garlic, salt and pepper. They cook really quickly, but just be mindful if you're cooking, some of you might already have had this experience. You might be like, wow, I got all these greens, and you cook them down and then it's like, they shrink way down. You're still going to get like those phytonutrients are all very heat stable. So you're still going to get those phytonutrients out of the deal, just not as much volume, right? And we might sometimes cook them into omelets, throw them in with like some onions and some cheese, or we might toss frozen leafy greens into shakes, smoothies. We might put them into soups. And I think, again, in terms of cost effectiveness, depending on how good we are about using our fresh produce that we bring in the house and not wanting it to land up having the fate of, that's black slimy thing I found in the back of the fridge. What the heck is this? Oh, wait, it's the spinach I thought I was going to use. I'm a huge fan, if you haven't picked up already, on the freezer. So frozen leafy greens can be awesome. And of course, if you get like a block of spinach, that's going to be hard to use as you go unless you're using it all at once. But they do sell bags of like chopped loose kale, spinach, and things like this. And those can be very handy to just toss into things. And again, very affordable. Oh, and someone's asking about frozen. Yeah, since I keep talking about frozen, about if the frozen's more nutritional than fresh that we get from the market, how it's flash frozen. Yeah. That's a really great question. So in a lot of cases, depending on the time of year, especially for those of us in New England where we don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables that are grown locally all year round, frozen foods can in some cases be just as good, if not better, than some of the stuff that we get that's fresh produce in the market. And we think about when we pick our produce, after the time it's picked, it starts to lose nutrient quality. So if you think about like, boy, I'm looking at these berries that came from wherever, and they've been on planes, trains, and automobiles taking their sweet time coming to the grocery store, and then I bring them home and I take my sweet time getting to eat them, versus when we pick fresh berries, or not we, like food manufacturers, when they pick their berries or they pick the fresh spinach, they wait and pick it when it's like peak ripeness. They flash freeze that like right in that moment. And it's almost like frozen in time. So we retain all of those vitamins, all of those nutrients, and those plant chemicals as well. So that's a really good question. Okay. So a next one here. And again, this might be one of those places, if you are just not a seafood person, no big deal. We can talk about some other ways to get some things in, but if you like seafood, it's great to include fish. Fish can be very nutrient dense. It's a great source of lean protein in the case of shellfish and white fishes. Great source of omega-3 heart healthy fats if we're having fatty fishes or salmon, for instance. And in all cases, our seafood is going to be a great source of selenium. So selenium is a vitamin that helps in the body, especially with brain health again. So you're sensing a theme here, right? Brain, nervous system, blood vessels, all of this. Also too, the selenium, just like total side note, if you ever had any concerns about mercury, there's a lot of great research that shows us that the selenium can actually neutralize the effect of mercury. So if you were like, oh no, I'm having tuna, like, don't worry about it. Or if you have a high mercury, you like a high mercury seafood that you have sometimes, the selenium in the fish is very likely to really lower the impact of that. Total side note. But anyhow, if we look at some of the nutrients that we're going to get from our fish, we're going to be looking at something like choline, which is essential to get from our food. We make a little bit in the liver, but we do need to try to get it in our diet. Also plays a huge role in brain and nervous system health, also regulating mood and memory and that kind of thing. Zinc, our B vitamins, again, B vitamins, I don't think I've talked much about yet, but our B vitamins are really essential for thinking about like our metabolism, turning our food into energy in the body for all those reactions to take place. And B6 in particular is involved as what we call a cofactor, a helper component in over 100 metabolic reactions in the body. So if we're not getting enough of our B vitamins, then that can definitely impact our metabolism. Couple different examples here. I love the example of the oysters because it's just like so crazy high in zinc, but not many people are eating oysters, at least not around here and not on a regular basis. So also too, if you do include something like salmon, we're going to get more than half our day's amount of vitamin D in there, which is awesome because vitamin D is super hard to get in the diet. And we're going to get more than 100% of our B12 from just a 3-ounce portion of salmon as well. And I think it's a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the question about supplements if we're not getting enough in our diet. For the most part, if we're eating well and balanced in a variety of foods, unless we're on, we're having some other issues where we might not be eating well and balanced, we can generally try to get most of our stuff that we need from food. I'm very much a food first person. However, there are some instances where we may not get that. If I'm not eating fish on the regular, I'm probably not going to get that vitamin D. So, and if I'm somebody who works indoors and I'm not outdoors, even in the wintertime with my skin exposed, getting vitamin D from the sun, then vitamin D is reasonable to supplement with. The omega-3s can be reasonable to supplement with if I'm not having fatty fishes. So those can be things that might be worth talking to your doctor about considering a supplement. When it comes to the research, lots of really great research on seafood and fish, although most of it, I have to be honest with you, has to do with either replacing fish instead of red meats, which tend to be higher in saturated fat and more of a predictor of heart disease, or some of the other great studies done with fish and all the benefits of fish and seafood tend to be really focused on the omega-3 components, which again, as I mentioned before, is really going to primarily come from our fatty fishes like salmon, for instance, and mackerel and bluefish and those guys. So across the board, though, we're still going to find our fish and our seafood is going to be anti-inflammatory. There's a lot of research that supports our mental health, fetal brain development, if we're a developing baby, overall heart health. So there's some good studies that show lower triglyceride levels, raising our good cholesterol, our HDL, like the one time we say, the doctors might tell us they want the labs higher, right? Reducing our risk of heart disease, heart failure, sudden death from cardiac events, all of that stuff comes from having our fish more regularly. So how to use it can be really tricky if it's fresh, right? You want to make sure that you pick a fish that's not smelling fishy. To be honest, if you're getting it fresh, frozen can be a really great way because again, it's flash frozen at sea in most cases. And so you're going to preserve that nutrient density there. Also too, you don't have to worry about, gosh, if I brought home the fish, but then my schedule went crazy and I didn't get to cook it. Usually if we bring in fresh fish, we want to cook it within a day or two at most. But we really can cook it any way you like it. If you like it baked or broiled or grilled or stir fried or pan fried, just kind of serve it with a starch and a veggie for a meal. You have a well-balanced meal there. And then again, when it comes to cost, it can be a real barrier for some people, I think, especially if you're trying to get fresh fish can be really costly and expensive. There's no problem at all with including canned fishes. And if you're somebody who, again, if cost is an issue for the salmon or you just don't like the taste of it, I've got a lot of families that I work with that actually swap in canned salmon and mix it up just the same way they would with like tuna salad for their family. And most of the time their kids don't even notice, to be honest. One thing that they would notice though, is just pay attention if you have either you're serving it to others who might be unsuspecting or you yourself don't particularly have bones in your food. There are small bones in regular canned salmon, so you're going to want to choose a boneless one if that's not for you. But we might use like the pouches or the cans that we can quickly toss onto a salad, or we might quickly, like I said, mix it into a tuna salad or make like a creative one. You could do like a curry tuna salad, or you could do an Italian or Mediterranean one, right? Just like a little bit of dressing. It does not have to be the standard like mayo and tuna kind of thing or mayo and salmon. And sometimes people stir it into a pasta sauce, all kinds of different ways to use that. Okay. When it comes to our nuts and seeds, you're probably not going to be surprised to hear about this one. I feel like there's a lot more out there about the benefits of our nuts and seeds. It's a great heart healthy fat that we're going to get from here. Also a little bit of protein, also some fiber. And we're going to really get like a whole variety of families of our phytonutrients here. So that's awesome. We're casting a wide net there. They're going to be a great source of vitamin E, also a wonderful, powerful antioxidant, which also plays a huge role in immune mediation, meaning like regulating the immune response in the body. So keeping our immune system strong. All these other vitamins and minerals as well. And just for perspective, if I just have 1 ounce of roasted almonds, an ounce of nuts generally is, I think, like about a small handful, about a quarter of a cup generally speaking. I think about it as like the amount you can fit in your hand without it spilling over. So an ounce of roasted almonds will give us almost half our day's amount of vitamin E, almost 20% of our magnesium. So we're going to get a bunch of nutrients from our nuts. Again, as I mentioned, the antioxidant, there's studies that show if we're eating nuts several times a week, we might reduce our heart disease risk by as much as 30 to 50%, which is pretty impressive and really, to be honest, on par with some medications that are out there. We're going to get immune system boost from our nuts as well. So if you are a nut person and you like them, you might find you just as well like to snack on them as a standalone here and there, or paired up with some fruit, for example, or turn it into a trail mix. Some people will add it as like a little topping onto a salad, onto yogurt, oatmeal, something like that. Or if you have a texture aversion, or you just kind of prefer, you're just a peanut butter lover or an almond butter lover, we can spread that on crackers or on toast, or go for a good old fashioned peanut butter sandwich, for example, or make like a simple peanut sauce for a dressing with just like a little bit of peanut butter and rice vinegar, garlic and ginger, and suddenly we turn like a regular piece of salmon into like a Thai salmon. So we can find different creative ways to use these foods and get them into our diet if we happen to like them. Just one thing I'll draw your attention to when it comes to our nuts and seeds, because they're very calorie dense. So there's also, they're nutrient dense, right? A lot of nutrients in a small package, also a lot of calories in a small package. So that 1 ounce of nuts is going to be generally about 150 to 200 calories, which is a well worth it, in my opinion, sort of like calorie investment, but just be aware of that so that you're not thinking like, oh, you know, nuts are a great one to include, so I'm going to be eating them all day, every day. Those calories will quickly add up. And if you're someone who's trying to manage your weight in one way or another, that's something to factor in. All right, another one on the list here, we've got our yogurt. So great source of nutritious protein. We're also going to get nutritious carbohydrate out of there. And again, even if we're choosing a plain yogurt, we're going to get some natural carbohydrates that come from the milk that was turned into yogurt. So that's not going to be the added sugars that are in there. We're going to get some carbohydrate just from the milk to start. Going to be a great vehicle for calcium, potassium, magnesium, some B vitamins. And even if we have just 3/4 of a cup, we're going to get probably about 6 to 8 grams of protein there, 20% of our calcium for the day, and more than half of our B12 for the day. So you can see how, like, if you like some of these foods and you just try to include even a few of them on a regular basis, it's going to be pretty easy to get some of these nutrients in over the course of a day. So some of the great things about yogurt, they're going to contain some beneficial bacteria. You're going to want to look at labels to say that it's got live and active cultures. You might look for extra strains in there. We could do a whole other talk on probiotics, to be honest with you. But if they do have some extra probiotics in there, that might play a role in immune health. But just generally, the cultures that are in yogurt have been shown to help with gut regularity, bowel regularity, gut health overall. There's also, again, a whole bunch of research emerging about the microbiome, meaning like all the organisms and things that live in our gut that play a huge role in keeping us healthy and well. So if you like yogurt, we can have it as a parfait layered with fruits and nuts, a high protein substitute to swap out for higher fat sour creams and things like that. Pretty much however you like. And again, the only thing to pay attention with the yogurt is looking at the label for like those cultures and things. And I'm going to zip along a little more because we've got a few more left on the list here, and I'm looking at the time and it's 1:28. All right. So the broccolis, again, the good news is I can zip through some of our vitamins and things because we've covered a lot of them already. But I think of these as, even if not broccoli, the stinky vegetables. Okay, so the stinky vegetables are going to be really high in the glucosinolates. These families are the ones that some of the compounds are sulforaphane, right? Sulfur, you can pick up on that one, the sulfur smell. Some of these are really strong smelling, but they provide really great benefits in the body. They help the liver to detoxify. So we have a natural detoxification organ called our liver that helps to clear out all the stuff we're exposed to. And it seems that these guys, these compounds in this family of vegetables can really help to be efficient in that. So even if we have just like 1 serving a day of these types of vegetables, we might find that it also protects against heart disease. There's some newer research that came out about that. So that's something to stay tuned for. Then also cancer preventative properties, potentially, especially looking at breast, prostate, and one other one, breast and prostate cancer for sure. I think stomach cancer was the other one, that they might have a preventative effect when we're having a lot of these. So we might have them raw, we might have them cooked in stir fries or in soups or stews. And if you're looking for some cost savings, cabbage is the way to go. That guy will last forever. And also too, you know, one head of cabbage is very, very inexpensive. Usually they're about like 99 cents a pound or something like that. You get a lot of, when you start chopping up a head of cabbage, you get a lot of mileage out of that. We can use it to stretch out salads, stretch out meals. All right, and our tomatoes, the biggest thing I'm going to focus on here is the lycopene. A lot of people are familiar with the lycopene, but that's going to have a key role in the development of cardiovascular disease, like notably lowering it, lowering stress markers in the body, reducing cholesterol, improving our blood vessel function, keeping arteries stretchy and elastic, and also potentially responsible for the role in possibly helping to minimize risk of Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's. So stay tuned for some of that research to keep emerging as well. And we could have these guys also any way we like, whether it's cooked down or whether it's raw. We do get actually a little bit more benefit from the lycopene side of things if it's cooked. So again, don't get married to I've got to have fresh raw tomatoes. If you like spaghetti sauce or something, that's a great way to get it in. On our whole grains here are going to also be great sources. Again, I think going back to the carbohydrate conversation before about the fruits, the whole grains are also going to be a great source of nutritious carbohydrates packaged up with all kinds of different phytonutrients as well as fiber. And I'm going to buzz through these real quick because I know this will be recorded. So I want to make sure that we get through all of it so that if you have a chance to go back and kind of see the end of it. Soy is also going to be one. We don't get a lot of press time to soy unless we know people who are vegetarian or vegan, but it's a great complete plant protein. So it's going to give us some nutritious carbohydrates and protein, packed full of all those other nutrients that we get from our plant foods too, with a lot of health benefits. And there's lots of ways we can include that as well. And probably not surprising, our citrus groups as well. So whether it's, you know, grapefruit, orange, lemon, lime, what have you, obviously most people don't just sit and eat a lemon or lime. But one thing I'll just draw your attention to, I really wanted to get to the slide to make sure, and if you're not aware already, some of our citrus, particularly grapefruit, gets a really bad rep in terms of medication interaction, and rightfully so. So it's something to be really aware of. Specific medicines do react with grapefruit and grapefruit juice, so you're going to want to pay attention to that, but also chock full of a lot of these great phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals and lots of great health benefits for the body. So I apologize for rushing through the end there. I just wanted to make sure I shared as much with you as I possibly could. And clearly, you know, we have a lot of questions about this stuff, and I really appreciate all of you chiming in, and I appreciate you coming today. And hopefully you'll have a chance, if there was anything you missed or questions that we didn't answer, to follow up and watch the recording too. Oh yeah, so if anyone, so I don't know when this like cuts off. I know I want to be respectful of your time and it's 1:30, but I'm happy to go back to slide 8, right? So the whole grains. Yep. So I guess so I'm done and you all can leave, but I'll leave this up for now so that people can see it. Oh, you guys are so welcome. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. I'm so glad you made it. Oh, and access the recording. I think it was posted. If you scroll up a little bit above, there is a YouTube link. It was posted at 1:31. They posted the link for the recording in the chat box. Oh, and on the Wayland site. There you go. Perfect. Thank you.